Imagine waking up one morning to discover that your 60-year-old neighbor has been accused of flying on a broomstick during the night, that the town baker has been denounced for making pacts with the devil, that your own daughter might be possessed by demonic forces. Does it sound absurd? Welcome to Salem, Massachusetts, in the year 1692. In a small Puritan village in New England, paranoia and religious fanaticism combined to create the most shameful episode in American judicial history. In less than 1 year, 20 innocent people were executed, more than 200 were imprisoned, and an entire community was destroyed by collective hysteria. But here's what will truly shock you. It all began with 2 girls aged 9 and 11 playing with tarot cards in a basement. How did a simple childhood prank transform into colonial America's greatest judicial catastrophe? The answer reveals the deadly dangers of religious extremism, social prejudice, and justice based on superstition. To understand the tragedy of Salem, we must dive into the mind of a society obsessed with fear of the devil. At the end of the 17th century, New England Puritans lived in constant spiritual terror. For them, Satan was always lurking, attempting to corrupt souls and destroy their sacred community. The village of Salem was a place where pleasure was sin, where laughing loudly could be considered blasphemy, and where any unusual behavior was viewed with deadly suspicion. It was a society repressed to the extreme, where social tensions simmered beneath the surface of apparent Christian piety. During the winter of the year 1691 to 1692, Elizabeth Parris, 9-year-old daughter of Reverend Samuel Parris, and her 11-year-old cousin Abigail Williams began exhibiting strange behaviors, mysterious convulsions, unexplained screams, bizarre bodily contortions. The local physician, William Griggs, after examining the girls, reached a terrifying conclusion. They were under diabolical influence. But what had really happened? Historical evidence suggests the girls were playing with divination practices learned from Tituba, a Caribbean slave of the Parris family. They experimented with egg whites in water to see the future, consulted cards, and participated in activities strictly forbidden by rigid Puritan morality. When they were discovered, the girls probably panicked. To avoid severe punishment, they began feigning demonic possession. What perhaps started as a desperate lie from frightened children quickly transformed into a convincing performance that deceived the entire community. The hysteria spread like a contagious virus. Other young women in the village began presenting similar symptoms. Ann Putnam Jr., 12 years old, Mercy Lewis, 17, and Mary Walcott, 16, also claimed to be tormented by witches. Soon, 9 girls were having public attacks that terrorized the adults. Under intense pressure from the community and religious authorities, the girls were forced to name their supposed tormentors. Their first targets revealed the deep social tensions that divided Salem. They accused Tituba, the Caribbean slave, Sarah Good, a beggar despised by the community, and Sarah Osborne, a widow who had scandalized the village by marrying her servant. The choice of these 3 women was no coincidence. All were social outcasts, a slave, an indigent, and a woman who had defied social norms. They were perfect targets for a community that needed scapegoats for its fears and anxieties. The interrogation of Tituba on the first day of March in the year 1692 was the moment that transformed local suspicions into widespread hysteria. Under extreme pressure and probably fearing for her life, Tituba confessed not only to being a witch, but also revealed elaborate details about a supposed satanic cult operating in Salem. She described flights through the night sky, encounters with the devil in the forest, and diabolical rituals involving other women in the community. Her confession, obtained through psychological coercion, provided exactly what the interrogators wanted to hear: confirmation that a satanic conspiracy threatened their Christian community. From that moment, the situation spiraled completely out of control. If Tituba had confessed and named accomplices, it meant other witches were hiding in the community. Paranoia spread like wildfire. Neighbors began suspecting neighbors, families divided, and social trust collapsed completely. The accusations followed predictable patterns that revealed pre-existing tensions in the community. Independent women were attacked first. Martha Corey, who had publicly questioned the validity of the accusations, was immediately denounced as a witch. Rebecca Nurse, a respected 71-year-old lady, was accused because her family was involved in territorial disputes with the Putnams. The judicial system that emerged to handle the accusations was fundamentally flawed from the beginning. The Court of Oyer and Terminer was established by Governor William Phipps in the month of May in the year 1692. The court accepted as valid evidence what they called spectral evidence, testimonies that the spirit of the accused had appeared to torment victims. This form of evidence was particularly insidious because it was impossible to refute. If an accuser claimed to have seen someone's spirit committing evil acts, how could the accused prove that her spirit had not done such a thing? It was a system that guaranteed convictions, not justice. The trials became theatrical spectacles where the young accusers had dramatic fits in the presence of the accused. They screamed, contorted, claimed to be physically attacked by invisible spirits. The judges, educated men who should have known better, were completely deceived by these performances. Bridget Bishop was the first to be executed on the 10th day of June in the year 1692. She was hanged at Gallows Hill before a crowd that included many of the neighbors who had lived peacefully with her for years. Her death should have satisfied the community's bloodlust, but it only fueled the hysteria. The executions continued throughout the summer. On the 19th day of July in the year 1692, 5 people were hanged in a single afternoon: Rebecca Nurse, Sarah Good, Susanna Martin, Elizabeth Howe, and Sarah Wilds. Among them was Rebecca Nurse, whose execution shocked even some supporters of the trials due to her impeccable reputation in the community. Sarah Good spoke prophetic words moments before her death. When Reverend Nicholas Noyes urged her to confess to save her soul, she replied, "You are a liar. I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take my life, God will give you blood to drink." Decades later, Noyes died choking on his own blood due to internal hemorrhaging. The most tragic case was perhaps that of Giles Corey, an 80-year-old farmer who refused to plead guilty or innocent. Under English law, a person who made no plea could not be tried, but could be physically pressed to force a response. Corey was subjected to pressing torture. Heavy stones were placed on his chest until he agreed to make a declaration. For 3 days, Giles Corey endured increasing agony as more stones were added. His only words were, "More weight," an extraordinary demonstration of courage and defiance. He died on the 19th day of September in the year 1692, never having been formally tried. His brutal death shocked even some supporters of the trials. The hysteria reached its peak when prominent figures began to be accused. Mary Easty, sister of Rebecca Nurse, was executed on the 22nd day of September in the year 1692. Before dying, she wrote a petition to the court, not pleading for her own life, but begging that executions be stopped to prevent more deaths of innocents. The turning point came when accusations began targeting members of the social elite, including the governor's own wife. Influential people realized that no one was safe if the hysteria continued. Respected ministers like Increase Mather began publicly questioning the validity of spectral evidence. In the month of October, in the year 1692, Governor Phipps dissolved the Court of Oyer and Terminer and prohibited the use of spectral evidence in future trials. The hysteria began to subside when people realized that their neighbors, family members, and community leaders were being destroyed by unfounded accusations. When the dust settled, the toll of the tragedy was terrifying. 20 people had been executed, 14 women and 6 men. More than 200 people had been imprisoned. Families were destroyed, properties confiscated, and social trust was completely fragmented. Years later, many of the participants acknowledged their errors. In the year 1706, Ann Putnam Jr., one of the main accusers, made a public confession in Salem Village Church. She admitted to being an instrument in accusing several people of serious crimes and asked forgiveness for her participation in the tragedy. The judges also eventually recognized their mistakes. Samuel Sewall, one of the tribunal magistrates, made a public confession of guilt in the year 1697. He admitted to being deceived and accepted responsibility for the unjust executions. But the apologies came too late for the 20 people who had lost their lives. The Salem tragedy became a permanent symbol of the dangers of collective hysteria, religious fanaticism, and justice based on superstition and prejudice. Modern analysis of Salem's events reveals multiple factors that contributed to the tragedy. Social tensions between different parts of the community, land disputes, personal resentments, and a power structure that marginalized certain people, especially independent or nonconformist women. Contemporary theories also suggest possible explanations for the symptoms of the possessed. Some historians have proposed ergot poisoning, a fungus that grows on rye and can cause convulsions and hallucinations. Others point to extreme psychological stress in a repressive society, or simply deliberate fraud on the part of the accusers. Regardless of the specific causes of the initial symptoms, what is clear is that the judicial system failed catastrophically. Spectral evidence, confessions obtained under coercion, and social prejudices replaced the genuine search for truth. The result was the destruction of a community and the death of innocent people. The Salem tragedy teaches us vital lessons about the dangers of extremism, intolerance, and corrupt justice. It shows how apparently civilized societies can quickly descend into barbarity when dominated by fear and superstition. It is a dark reminder that constant vigilance is necessary to protect individual rights against the tyranny of the majority. Today, more than 300 years later, Salem continues to be a powerful symbol of the dangers of collective hysteria. Whenever societies are tempted to sacrifice justice in the name of security, or to persecute minorities based on fear and prejudice, the ghosts of Salem return to remind us of the terrible consequences of such choices. The worst judgment in American history was not just a tragedy of the distant past. It was a lesson about the fragility of civilization and the ease with which fear can transform neighbors into enemies, justice into vengeance, and communities into battlefields. The witches of Salem were not witches. They were victims of a society that chose fanaticism over reason, fear over compassion, and superstition over justice.